If you're at all familiar with Jeeps, or any vehicle for that matter, you probably heard things like standard, handshaker, stick shift. I saw a Jeep tire cover the other day that said millennial anti-theft device installed and had a picture of a manual shift pattern right there, which that was pretty funny. These are all terms used around the world to identify vehicles equipped with a manual gearbox. In today's video, I'll be going over some pros and cons of the 2020 Jeep JT Gladiator equipped with a 6-speed manual transmission, why I considered a Gladiator, and how I went about doing the test drives. And I know there's a lot of these out there, but I'll also go over a Gladiator specific manual transmission tutorial. So if you're still in neutral about which transmission option is best for you, this review could shift you in the right direction. Stick around. Hey, welcome back to another video here on the Gator Overland channel. I'm John, and I have a pretty good feeling you're tuning in today because you're having the exact same question I had for months before ordering my JT Gladiator. Do I go with a manual or automatic transmission? Well, it's a pretty good question to have. In my mind, there's a few different driver types out there. You have your manual experienced only, you have your automatic experienced only, and you have the ones like me right there in the middle that have experience with both manual and automatic transmission and have a really hard time deciding what best suits their needs, especially when coming to optioning a JT Gladiator here that has a manual transmission option. Personally, I think manual transmissions are just a blast to drive. You get that raw, nostalgic feel of the 1941, the Jeep lifestyle. Sure, there's some sacrifices of convenience in there, but what isn't in any car when you think of it that way? But being able to manually select each gear, it's just such an engaging experience and rarely ever boring. In fact, in more than 4,000 miles of driving now, I can say that the only one slightly less enjoyable experience I've had since owning it is a stretch of stop and go traffic through Houston. And thankfully I don't drive through Houston that often. But with the JTs ranging from the base sport model at around $33,000 on up to about $60,000 in a fully equipped Rubicon, making the decision of manual or automatic is a really big decision up front, especially since there's not very many reviews or YouTube videos or anything of that nature. So this video is for you. So rather than sit here and talk about it any further, let's go for a ride. As mentioned, Jeep offers the 6-speed manual transmission in all Gladiator trim models equipped with the 3.6-liter Pentastar V6 gasoline engine, saving you around $2,000 from the automatic transmission counterpart. Soon the 3.0-liter V6 turbocharged EcoDiesel will be available for the Gladiator, but Jeep doesn't have any plans to mate this manual transmission with that 442 foot-pound torque monster of a power plant. I'm sure it's going to have a few off-road enthusiasts and crawling enthusiasts perturbed, especially the ones that have been waiting patiently for the release of the diesel, but they are now forced into an unavoidable $6,000 combination between a diesel which runs $4,000 as an option, or estimated anyway, and $2,000 is the option for the automatic transmission. So you can understand that before you've even bought the truck, you're already $6,000 into the vehicle just to have the diesel application. I wouldn't be surprised if they offer the manual transmission diesel combo in international markets like South America, Africa, Australia. I'm sure Ronnie Dahl wouldn't hesitate to wheel a stick shift and diesel powered JT down under. That'd be pretty cool to see on one of his shows. Now, if you don't already know this may come as a big disappointment, especially for those of you who've been waiting for a Gladiator but are unaware of a few things about them, especially if you're going with a manual transmission. If you go with the manual transmission, that 7,650 pound best-in-class tow rating takes a swift kick in the pants down to a meager 4,000 pound tow rating. As far as the truck goes, that's not a whole lot more than what the Jeep Wrangler offers, but honestly, if you're looking at this truck for a mainstay of towing, you're probably looking at the wrong vehicle. Why the drastic decrease? My assumption is the Aisin AL6 transmission the JT shares with the JL was not upgraded with heavy-duty parts like a clutch and flex plate to match the torque ratings of the automatic transmission. One, probably to save a bit of money on a redesign, and two, to maintain this wonderful clutch disengagement feel. It truly is like driving a sports car in here. It also might have something to do with emissions. For some reason, emissions with a manual transmission is different than with an automatic. With that said, if you have any big tow plans or deal with a lot of traffic, but you want to keep the open air experience option on your list of things to do because it is awesome, you may want to consider the 8-speed automatic transmission. And if you don't need any of that, none of that applies to you, and any of these cons didn't burn your clutch of hope, then you might want to consider test driving one of these manuals because it is awesome. Like you're doing now, I had scoured the internet since the release of the JT last April for any and all Gladiator information I could find, more specifically with a manual transmission. I wanted to be sure that I was making the right decision going with the manual transmission. Only recently has there been any decent Gladiator content out there, but my searches opened me up to this incredible community of installers, off-roaders, and overlanders like Brad of Trail Recon, Eddie of Way of Life, Ben and Cassie of JK Gear and Gadgets, can't forget about Kevin and Brittany of Lightbright, and then there's that loner out there, Chris of Venture Forward. All great content creators, all with great information and great influence. You should check them out. I'll leave some links below. I told myself years ago that if Jeep ever made a truck again, I would absolutely consider it, and probably go full Rubicon at that. I mean, we're talking Dana 44 solid axles front and rear, electronic lockers front and rear, sway bar disconnect, 4:1 crawl ratio transfer case, optional top removal, and a 5.5-foot bed. Where do I sign? To my advantage, I don't tow often, and when I do, I don't tow much weight. So it only seemed right for me to keep it Jeep and opt for the manual transmission. That said, let's go hit a trail. All right, test drives. Since my 2014 Silverado had already been paid off and my mileage was still pretty fair, I wasn't exactly thrilled about getting directly into another truck note. So part of me wanted to actually hate my first Gladiator test drive experience just to justify sticking with a more than capable and paid off Silverado. Well, I didn't hate it. In fact, I couldn't find one thing to dislike about my Gladiator test drive experience. My first test drive was in May of 2019, and it was in a fully loaded Rubicon Launch Edition, and though it was automatic and completely out of my price range, it would still give me a general idea for handling, if it's roadworthy, wind noise, drivability, things like that. Since this would be my first dealer order experience, I wanted to be completely confident with my transmission selection. So over the next few months, I would test drive in the max tow packages, the Sport S, the Overland, and the Rubicon models in both manual and automatic transmission in both soft and hard top applications, just to get a feel for the differences and line out my budget in the process. Even though the base Sport S and Overland model with the max tow package were completely comfortable and more than capable for my needs, I went ahead and upgraded to the more capable Rubicon option. Not necessarily for the badging and the simple accents and stuff like that, but going with the Rubicon allowed me to include things like the differential locks, sway bar disconnects underneath the note, rather than get a lesser equipped model and pay for those upgrades out of pocket over a period of time. It just made more sense to me. I get to save my time and my money by putting a little extra into the note and being just completely satisfied. I haven't regretted my decision at all. Now, if you're planning on upgrading axles or you don't need the capabilities of the Rubicon, by all means, the Overland and the base Sport S are completely fine. Now, I'll probably always be a Chevy guy at heart, but I can honestly say I haven't for one day missed my Silverado or the extra 70 horsepower since trading to the JT. The comfortable ride alone, more specifically in the Rubicon, not to say that the Overland or the Sport S are less comfortable, the Rubicon has a little bit different ride to it because it has a different spring rate, and I prefer that one over the other two, but it's to each their own on that one. I also did previously mention how smooth the shifter operation and disengagement of the clutch is. It's basically sports car like, and for that I can honestly say that I am very happy with my selection to go with the manual transmission. It allows me to just do what I want to do, shift gears, and not have to worry about it. It's very engaging. I recommend it to anybody. Would not think to do it a different way. I mean, could go automatic if I wanted to pull a little bit more, but I mean, like I said, I don't pull anything, so manual it is, and I get to keep it Jeep. I mean, wait till you try first gear 4-low in the manual transmission. It's, well, rather than explain it, let's just go do it. It just walks. All right, as I said in the beginning, I was going to do a quick Gladiator specific tutorial. So first of all, say we got our key here. It's got a lock situation that works on the outside of the vehicle, but it does not have a key switch here. Rather, it is just an RF, a radio frequency that once you get in the vehicle, it recognizes that you're here. It also recognizes if you're too far away and will not allow you to start. To start, obviously in a manual transmission, you will have to push the clutch in, and as long as your key's here, push, and you're good to start. Jeep got real smart and decided to put that there. Usually I just keep the key in my pocket and everything's good to go. The first step to do with the manual transmission as a benefit is go to settings and go down to safety and driving assistance. You will want to hit, it'll probably be selected like this, hill start assist. What that does is there's a momentary hesitation when the hill start assist is whenever you're in an incline or a decline. When you remove your foot off the brake and start to release the clutch, it keeps your vehicle from rolling by applying a little bit of brake pressure. I found that on flat land it's not necessary, and it actually is quite the hesitation when taking off and can contribute to stalling out. So deselect that. This is also where tire fill assist, if so equipped. This will allow you, if you're selected, you can go outside and your vehicle will honk at you once you set your tire rating. If you're at 40 psi and you want to go down to 25 or 15, you select that whenever you're in your off-road stuff and you go outside and air down. It will allow you to be notified on the exterior without having to actually watch, even if you don't have your little air chuck pressure gauge. So you can select that if you want. I do not have it selected at this point, but that is the only thing that I think is necessary if you're driving a manual transmission and you're on flat land initially. Hill start assist is not necessary. All right, as you can see, it's pretty simple. The configuration of the pedals is exactly like every manual transmission. You have your accelerator on the right, brake pedal in the middle, and clutch on the left. You have your emergency handbrake right here, emergency brake, handbrake, parking brake, all the same. You have your four-wheel drive lever here, 2 high up, straight back 4 high, over is neutral, and back is 4 low. And you have your gear selector here, which is configured in reverse all the way over, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The cool thing about what Jeep has done here, I don't know if you can see, but there is a reverse lock lever. You cannot accidentally put it in reverse while you're going forward. You would have to pull up on the lever, then you would allow you to go all the way over to reverse and forward, which will activate your reverse camera if so equipped. And then whenever you get done using reverse, you come back out, it centers and releases, and then you go back over as if you're going to reverse all the way to first, and you would go there. So other than that, you do not need necessarily any acceleration to begin rolling when releasing the clutch if you do it smoothly. Most cars are capable of doing this, but even as a truck, it is a pretty light truck, so it overcomes the engine to transmission not moving inertia pretty simply if you guide it out. But I found that applying about 1,000 RPM, as you can see here, it's about 600 from just idle. If you rev it up to about 1,000 RPM as you're releasing out, because you have kind of an inverse pedal pressure of acceleration and release of the clutch kind of work inversely together, at least in first gear. First gear is always the hardest in a manual transmission, but to each their own. You will find a way to manage your shifting. Also, when shifting, I found that 3,000 RPM is an ideal shift point. If you go less than 3,000, obviously if you're going slower and don't need necessarily to accelerate fast, 3,000 is, it keeps you from nosediving, and it makes for really easy gear transfers because there is about 1,000 RPM between gear exchanges. So if you're at 30 miles an hour, 3,000 RPM, and you shift into fourth gear, it will then drop down to 2,000. So it goes from 3,000 to 2,000, and it's a perfect engagement. If you should be less than 3,000, all that ends up happening is a little bit more of a nosedive,
and slight bogging. So 3,000 RPM, it feels kind of high in this vehicle, but it's more of just a sound than it is high RPM. I found that it actually does manage pretty well with the fuel economy by going to 3,000. But other than that, first gear is actually really short. There was a point in time whenever I first got the vehicle that going across an intersection, it seemed that first I was almost having to rev out real quick. So I was starting in second, which required you to ride the clutch quite a bit. Well, that's not necessary. Just stick with first, get used to it being a very short gear. It is definitely going to be beneficial having the short, low gear like that if you are pulling something. Of course, as mentioned, when pulling, the manual equipped is not rated for the full 7,650 pounds, even less so 7,000 pound in a Rubicon because of all the extra gear that comes on it. It is rated at a 4,000 pound rating. But even so, first gear, that low first gear is going to be great for just basically idling off a stoplight. So that said, that's a pretty brief overview. Let's go ahead and get a few miles for y'all to see. By the way, also downshifting, when you're slowing down to come to a stop or exit off the interstate, downshifting is super smooth. It finds each gear just quite right and meshes really nice. So you're able to actually use the transmission to slow down the vehicle rather than just the brakes. It really works well. Some vehicles are kind of picky on the downshift, but here we go. First gear, release the brake, everything looks good. And just to show you, I'm going to release out, no clutch, pull my leg up, and just slowly, as you can see, we're moving here. Has a little bog. I find that 3 to 5 miles per hour is the release speed. That's the idle speed. In reverse, the reverse gear is about 6 miles per hour with just idle. So there we go. We're going to, there we go, clutch in, clutch back out again. You can't see, so I'm just going to explain that. Clutch back in, applying a little bit of brake. Going to take a right. First gear, 1,000 RPM, and merging. We're already up to 3,000 shifting, and it's wonderful. Just completely great, smooth shift. I don't know if you can see the RPM gauge from there, this point of view. But once you get to about 40 miles an hour, the 3,000 is no longer necessary because your vehicle is actually moving. And typically, most roads around where I live are a county road of sorts and are about a 45 to 50 mile an hour speed limit. So it's not really necessary to be just ready to go until you get into the highway where it's upwards of 75 miles an hour. But currently we're cruising at 40 miles an hour in fourth gear. I found that the gear operation is almost by 10 miles per hour. So first gear to second, you'll be shifting at about 20 miles per hour. Second gear to third, you'll be shifting at about 30 miles an hour, plus or minus, depending on how much you're goosing it. This is at a 3,000 RPM rating there. And then same thing, fourth to fifth is at 50 miles an hour. So you can kind of see, it also helps you when you're downshifting. If you're going 50 and you're now at 40, you want to be in fourth gear. If you're in 40 and you're down to 30, you want to be in third gear. That way your operation of speed doesn't put you in a gear that is going to bog you down and potentially put you in a dangerous situation and or stall out your engine, which you do not want to do. It happens to everyone, so just accept the fact that it will happen to you. It's just a matter of getting used to avoiding that. The best thing to do in that situation, push the clutch down, because if the clutch is disengaged, you cannot kill the engine, no matter what. Whether you're just slightly coming around a turn or coming up to a stop, always push your clutch down first and then apply your brake as necessary. So with that said, that's a simple just walk through. Keep it, 3,000 RPM shift up to about fourth gear and you should be just fine. Other than that, it's really smooth and easy operation of this manual transmission. All right, just figured I would show y'all a downshift. So we're coming up to a turn and a slowdown, not using the brake. I'm down in fifth gear to fourth gear, revving out, third gear, and now I've applied the brake, second gear, back to first gear, 3,000 RPM. As you can see, the nosedive whenever pushing in the clutch is not very prominent, whereas if you were to shift going underneath a lot of acceleration earlier than 3,000 RPM, you will see quite a bit of nosedive, and that's just because torque and acceleration, when you release the clutch, the inertia is bound up going back and then it throws forward. So 3,000, just keep that in mind and you will forever have a great shifting manual transmission experience. I did not mention this earlier with the key. Little is this known, but if the battery should ever go out in your key fob, use the edge of your key and push it up against the start button. There is a magnet on the inside from what I understand, and it will then sense behind the actual button itself that the key fob is there, and you will then be able to start your car. So you just push against the button with your key if the battery has died. Just a little good tidbit of information that will keep you driving down the road if your key fob is not operational. Well, that about wraps things up. If you enjoyed today's video, found it informative or helpful in making your transmission decision, more so the decision to finally pull trigger on a Gladiator of your own, give us a big thumbs up. Let us know how we're doing. For a heads up on any future tips, trips, reviews, and installs, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget about that notification bell, and you can follow us along our journey. Remember, we at Gator Overland encourage each and every one of you to take a daily moment to unplug and reconnect with the outdoors, even if it's just for a few minutes. As always, we thank you for watching. Have fun, keep it safe, and just go. Thanks, y'all.